So if we're trying to match our worldly pace, if we're trying to pull our garden into the pace of the world, it's going to be frustration.
Yeah.
But if we can let the garden and the canning teach us the pace of the Holy Spirit and
Mm.
slow down, that's when we start to change because really you have to hit that slow down point before you can even hear the lessons.
Yeah. Welcome to The Home and the Maker, sharing advice and encouragement about all topics homemaking and homesteading, and honoring the maker in all of it. Join Megan from Shine.fm for today's conversation. If you grow your own food to feed your family, or maybe even buy in bulk from farmers markets or stock up on good deals at the store, you may find yourself employing one of several methods of preserving that food for storage. And one of those long-term methods is canning. So joining me to talk about all the canning things is Amber Benj, who shares all about her homesteading journey on her Instagram account, Grace Walk Farm, and has also written a book called Food Independence. And there are a million things I wish I could ask you about all of the homesteading experience that you have, but thanks for joining me to talk about canning, Amber.
Of course, it's one of my favorite topics, and I love when people want to talk about it.
Yes. So how did you start? Like, how did you learn how to can?
So I guess my canning journey would have started when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old.
Wow.
My grandparents lived on a farm, and I didn't get to see them all that often as a child. They lived kind of further away. But there was this one summer where I got to spend an entire 3 week block with them there on the
Aw.
farm. And that's like one of my best childhood memories. And I can remember that was the first time I saw like food in glass jars
Okay.
because my mama would can, and so she would send me down to the basement, the big dark scary basement, and
Yeah.
she would say, "Go grab, two big jars of green beans and one small jar of this." And then she would cook it. And I was like, Mama, your beans do not taste like beans that I have had,
Yeah.
from the grocery store. And I knew her beans were special. And so, my parents were living a much different lifestyle, very far from farm life, city life through and through, convenience foods. Like it was a completely different culture. So it wasn't something I was in at home.
Yeah.
But then fast forward and I become an adult and I get married and I have kids and I'm feeding them store-bought green beans. And like one day it occurs to me, what am I doing? Like I can do better than this. I should feed them what Mama fed me when I was little.
Yeah.
And I wanted to learn. And of course, I had no one to teach me.
Hmm.
That was my challenge because, at that time she no longer could can physically, and my mom didn't know how to do it, and so I set off on like this journey to teach myself. And my mother-in-law knew a little bit; she was able to help me a little, and then lots of trial and error and tears and failed jars.
No.
Um, but eventually I figured it out. And at the end of that process, I realized like this is truly a lost skill that young moms are terrified of. Like they're not even understanding how easy it is because it really is easy. And so I started putting together all my tips and sharing them on, social media, and then wrote a book and put recipes. And it's really all come from a place of kind of that Titus 2 thing of older moms helping younger moms. That's my
Yeah.
heart. I want the younger moms to know they can do this stuff too.
I love that so much. I have a little bit of canning experience when it comes to like canning pickles, and it seems
Yeah.
pretty straightforward following the
Hmm.
instructions. And so, is that kind of your, I guess, the way you would encourage others who don't know how to can, like follow directions? It's pretty straightforward and not something to really panic about.
Absolutely. I think the most important thing is make sure whoever you learn from is teaching you like really safe, trustworthy methods.
Mm,
Because, of course, with the internet, like you're going to find a lot of information that's not reliable too.
yeah,
So you want to look at like, there's some really great information from the Ball Company that does canning things.
yeah,
They have a lot of free recipes that you can start with. And then find a mentor. That is my biggest advice. If you can't find one in your local community, like connect with me online or another homestead mom online, and let us teach you the ropes so you're not doing it alone and you learn the correct way from the beginning.
Yeah.
And then you're not, you've learned this method and all of a sudden you realize, oh, this is making somebody sick, like you
Yeah.
really have to take it seriously. So
Yeah.
learn the
Awesome.
right way from the start.
Yeah. So you've mentioned you've had some jars go bad, and what I have read is that that's what scares me too, is that you're supposed to like be really careful when you touch it and like, bury it in the backyard. What do you do with those jars that don't make it?
So I don't stress about it really.
Okay.
The thing is, there's a lot of fear around botulism with candy.
Mm,
But botulism is actually like one of the most rare things that could even happen with a spoiled jar.
mm,
And it would be something you wouldn't have no idea because botulism has no smell, no taste. And so your botulism prevention comes when you're sterilizing your jars at the beginning and with like the clean protocol you follow.
yeah.
But then if something like if your seal breaks, or something happens afterwards, 99% of the time the problem was either user error in your process, and typically it's like one of two problems, and we can really quickly troubleshoot, or it's your supplies. And not
Mm.
all candy lids are created equal. I have tried all of them. I've spent a fortune testing, and they are not the same. There are good brands and there are bad brands, and there is a big difference.
Gotcha. So,
Yeah.
speaking of lids, there are some lids you can reuse. There are obviously the ones that you use one time. What do you kind of live by?
I use the one-time use lids, the
Okay.
disposable. I think the reusables are great, but
Mhm.
they're expensive, number one, if you need a lot of them. And so we can 800 to 1,000 jars a year.
Wow.
Like we have really tried to completely replace the grocery store with our garden. So on that scale, the disposable lids are just way more affordable.
Yeah.
And also, I really love the lids from Four Jars USA. It's
Mhm.
a Christian company that makes those lids. They're like a small business, family run, and um, I've had such good success with them that I've just quit even worrying with like the fancier,
Yeah.
repeat lids.
Gotcha. Okay, very cool. Very helpful. So, you store, wow, that is impressive. 800 to 1,000 jars every year. So, do you have a cold storage room? Are you storing them in your basement? What do you do?
So this is the thing that people don't realize. I live in a double wide mobile home. We don't
Ah,
have a basement. We
okay.
don't have a root cellar. We live very small and simple.
Hmm.
So storage is our biggest challenge by far.
Yeah.
And the way we store our jars currently is bookshelves mainly. We have tons and tons of bookshelves all over the house with our jars lined up. And then we have a spare bedroom that I set up to be like our family grocery store room.
Okay.
And it's got like the walls are lined with shelves, like wire shelves, and our deep freezers are in that room. And that's my organization room where I can
Okay.
see what have we got. Like this year, I still have probably 150 jars of tomatoes left. So
Wow.
this year's garden, I won't be canning a whole lot of tomatoes this year.
Hmm.
That takes the workload off,
Yeah.
like this year we'll focus on beans since last year was all about tomatoes.
Yeah. I love that. I can imagine just having a room like that. I would just stand there and be like, oh, this is so beautiful.
Yes. It's so rewarding, like to look at it and know, like we did that as a family. Like
Yeah.
we put those seeds in the ground and we tended it and we harvested it. And like every moment of that wasn't just about food. It was about
Mhm.
family. It was about
Yeah.
being together. And that's the part that just lights me up because we do
Ah,
this as a family.
yeah. So good. I love that. What are some of your favorite things to can?
Ooh. So my very favorite, like first time thing for people to do is any kind of fruit.
Okay.
Fruit is really simple. You can water bath canned fruit. And a lot of people start with jam or
Mhm.
pickles. And I think that can be a mistake because
Hmm.
jam is very finicky and pickles tend to get really soft and soggy when you can them.
Okay.
And so a lot of times, like people will can their pickles and they boil them just like crazy because they want to make sure they've done it long enough and safe enough. And then it comes out and it's like this like droopy, slimy, it's not a pickle you want to eat. And they're like, what did I do wrong? And it's not that you did anything wrong. It's just that like pickle making is kind of a science. There's an
Hmm.
art to that. And so it's not usually a first timer's game. My
Yeah.
first pickles, my dog wouldn't even eat them. He
Oh
threw them
no.
away. They were terrible. Like, give yourself a break if your pickles are bad. Mine were too. It took me a while.
Yeah.
But something like canning pineapple
Hmm.
or applesauce, peaches, something like that. That's a really great entry level canning project.
Okay. Cool. How did you amass all of the jars? Did you just buy them all? Is it because did you go to a thrift store and gather them? Where did all the jars come from?
That's such a good question. So I actually bought very, very few of my jars.
Okay.
My first stop was Facebook, and I made
Nice.
a post, and I was like, "Who has jars? Ask your grandparents, ask your parents, like any mason jars. I need them." And I mean, I think I collected like several hundred within like a day or two. People just were
Wow.
excited to clean their basements out, you know.
Yeah.
So pretty much all of my jars have come that way, secondhand. And then once people in my community knew that I was canning and collecting them, I've got like all of the elderly women in my church, they scope out yard sales and they bring me cases of used jars.
Aw.
And the thing with jars is the older ones are better.
Uh,
Like, don't feel like you have to go buy new jars because those old, like ball and cur jars, those things are going to last through the apocalypse, man. They are awesome. So go with the old ones.
yeah, it is funny how the older things sometimes are they're just better quality.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So, with the fruits and vegetables that you're canning, do you can most of them straight up in their pure form, or do you ever have a little, I don't know, extra fun and like make soups or do some extra blends of things?
I do a mix. Now, when I started, I did more just single ingredient things to
Yeah.
really like master the recipes. But once I got comfortable with that, I love to do like soup or chili, or you could even do like beef stew,
Mm,
kind of meal in a jar
yeah.
where it is convenience food, but it's not, you know, the preservative ridden kind. And so we do a lot of soup. If I make a pot of soup, I make like a 5 times bigger pot of soup than what we're going to eat. And we'll can that. And now I have lunches, you know, for the whole crew for weeks.
Right.
Just making really good use of your time and your strategy. And like canning has sort of become part of our routine now. When I
Mhm.
started, it was this whole, I had to set aside a day and hype myself up, you know.
Yes.
But now it's just part of my daily routine. Like, okay, I need to put these in the canner so like I can build it in and do other jobs around it. But it takes a little time to get there. So just like give a
Mhm.
lot of grace to yourself as you're learning.
I appreciate you saying that because I would think that, especially as it comes harvest time, there's a lot coming in and a lot you have to do in kind of a short time just because you don't want things to go bad. So to build it kind of into your schedule and make a routine of it sounds a lot better than, oh my goodness, I need to spend the whole day canning because I'm afraid this is going to go bad.
Yes. And use your freezer too.
Mhm.
That can help. Like with tomatoes, you can freeze them whole in like a gallon Ziploc bags and then make your sauce in the fall when you're not so
Mm,
busy. You know,
I
you don't
love
have to do
that.
it all in the summer. I do the same thing with my peppers. I freeze them and then in the fall, I'll make hot sauce and things when I'm not as busy with the garden.
That is so helpful. Because I was going to ask, when stuff is coming in a lot, do you set some away in cold storage? I mean, if you freeze some, that is super helpful. You can kind of can it later. And then the other question is, how do you, like you said, psych yourself up or stay motivated when you have so much coming in from the garden?
It can get really overwhelming. And so I think like there's this critical crossover point for each of us where the overwhelm takes it from like a good problem and a challenge to an overwhelm of stress.
Yeah.
And you've got to find that balance. Like when your garden is so big that it's causing overwhelm of stress, it's time to like dial it back and like make it match your life a bit.
Mm,
And really get strategic with your preservation strategy. Another really good tool that I don't think gets talked about a lot for preservation is freeze dryers.
Mm,
And they're expensive, it's a huge appliance, but I will say when your garden gets to the point where canning can't keep up with the preservation, you're ready for a freeze dryer because
mm.
it can come in and like get all the extra
Yeah,
and shelf stable and you're not standing over a stove while that happens.
right. That's good
My
advice
freeze
too.
dryer is kind of my cleanup vessel for
Yeah.
what I don't get with the canner.
Good to know. Now, we've talked about water bath canning, but talk to me about pressure canning and maybe ease some of those fears because I'm so type A. If I don't do it right, I'm going to be paranoid that this food isn't safe.
Absolutely. So pressure canning is the scariest canning,
Hmm.
but it doesn't have to be. It's all about technique. The biggest fear that I see that people have about pressure canning is that it's going to explode. This
Okay.
idea the canner will explode. And I can even remember my mama like wouldn't let me be in the kitchen while she was pressure canning because
Okay.
it's dangerous. So what I will tell you is today's pressure canners are not like the pressure canners our grandmas were using. They have safety mechanisms built in. There's a safety valve that would blow out to release the pressure safely without harming anyone. I mean, I'm not saying it can't happen,
Yeah.
but it very rarely would ever happen.
Yeah.
So, having a good new canner that's in good working quality, don't use your grandma's canner, just get a good one, new one.
Yeah.
And I say that, but I used Josh's grandma's canner for a year before I had the money to buy one. So, like,
Yeah.
I get it. But when you can, invest in a new one
Yeah.
um, and yeah, get in a class and watch someone do it
Okay.
because the process is just a little different. It's got more steps. It's not more complicated. It's just a couple extra steps. And
Okay.
so if you watch firsthand somebody walk through it, it'll take the fear out of it. You'll see it's
Yeah.
not nearly as scary as it looks.
Yeah. So how old are your kids? Do they help with the canning? Like, do they get excited about it?
I wouldn't say they get excited, but they will help.
Okay.
My kids are older. They were definitely more excited to help when they were younger, but they are, let's see, 17, 19, and 20.
Okay.
So I've got like young adults
Hmm.
now, and they are more apt to want to help in the garden than
Yeah.
with the preservation stuff. But they're also all like in college and jobs, and they're busy, so they're not here a lot.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But when they were little, they did love it.
Uh,
And there were so many lessons that I've been able to like teach them and share with them through the garden and the kitchen. And again, it's just that family time. That's the gift of
yeah.
all of these things, is time
Yeah.
with our people.
I love that. Did you have to maybe sometimes coax them into the garden? I know for us as kids, we were very, very much not resentful, but it was something we did not want to do.
Mhm.
So were there like how did you kind of engage them in the garden?
So I try to think of like what each one enjoys about the garden, like so my 17-year-old, he really enjoys seeding. Like I can
Mm.
ask him to plant seeds and he'll never complain. He enjoys that.
Yeah.
My daughter, my 19-year-old, she's like not that into it.
Hmm.
But I can ask her to plant flowers and she'll stay out there all day.
Aw.
She's super into the flowers and even the herbs. She loves the herbs too. So I know if I want her help, like if I give her those kind of jobs, she'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
And then my oldest is adopted and she hasn't been with us but for a couple of years. So this is all new to her.
Okay.
And so she has no idea what we're doing at all, but she's just loving the show at this point.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So speaking of lessons, what has God taught you as you've been through this process of canning and preparing food for your family and storing it? I mean, God has lessons for us in everything. So just curious, like if He's revealed to you some things through that process.
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe the overarching like theme that he continually brings me to, especially with the canning, is like the rhythm of our days and
Mm.
how we can like fall into a rhythm with him. And it doesn't have to be hurried. We live in like this really fast-paced, get it done world, and if homesteading and growing food and like if it's taught me anything, is that the pace of the Holy Spirit is slow
Mm,
and it's never in a hurry. Food doesn't grow in a hurry. It
yeah.
doesn't preserve in a hurry. And so if we're trying to match our worldly pace, if we're trying to pull our garden into the pace of the world, it's going to be frustration.
Yeah.
But if we can let the garden and the canning teach us the pace of the Holy Spirit and
Mm,
slow down, that's when we start to change because really you have to hit that slow down point before you can even hear the lessons.
yeah.
You have to stop being so busy even in your mind.
Hmm. That's where I'm at. I was telling my husband this week, I'm like, I just don't want to hurry anymore. I just want a
Yeah.
slower pace. And
Yes.
and just to, yeah, I think for me, it's a lot in my mind as far as feeling like I need to operate at this level, but really just, even though I don't have the whole homestead yet, just to enjoy that slower pace and take things slower in my life. So I look forward to getting to experience that on the more full-blown homestead. But
Yeah, absolutely. You'll get there. And that I think that's like the sweetest fruit of it all is seeing how just my day-to-day stress level, it's not that I'm less busy because goodness, homesteading is 24/7,
yeah,
but I don't feel the stress of busyness that I felt before.
yeah.
My heart has settled into that pace and it changes everything. Like when you finally sink into that and it's a good place to be.
I love that. Ah, I look forward to that. Thank you so
Yes.
much, Amber, for sharing today about canning. I mean, if there's any other tips, yeah, if you had like 3 tips on the top of your mind to share about canning, what are the top 3?
Okay, so immediately research steam canning. It's an alternative to water bath canning, and it's easier and it's cheaper to get started, and it's way less scary. So
Okay.
steam canning, I only steam can instead of water bath now. I love it that much.
Huh.
Number two is don't spend a fortune on canning supplies.
Yes.
Ask around because you can get this stuff for free.
I
Uh,
love that you shared that because I think that that's awesome just to take that route. And like you said, people want to get rid of stuff in their basements.
yes, yes, absolutely. And I think people think canning is going to be super expensive, and so they're afraid to get into it. It's really not. I mean, your lids are the only ongoing expense.
Hmm.
And then let's see, a third tip, I would say can what your family eats.
Yes.
So, if you're not going to eat sauerkraut, don't make 50 jars of sauerkraut. Ask
Yeah.
me how I know. Like, even if the recipe looks fine, there's no
Yeah.
point in all that work if you know your people won't eat it. So
Right.
go for what your family enjoys.
Absolutely. Well, such good insight into canning. Thank you for just sharing your experience. I wish I could ask you everything about just looking at your Instagram. I'm like, oh man, you know so much about herbs and all the things. But thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Yes. And if you want to follow Amber on social media, it's Grace Walk Farm.
Right. And we also have a brand new website called gracewalkfarm.org where I'm
Mm,
putting recipes and stuff if people need some free recipes.
perfect. Thank you so, so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Home and the Maker podcast. And for other podcasts from Shine.fm, visit the Shine.fm podcast channel.